that Ahmad was shot 6 times in 2 seconds, I believe, or 4 seconds. And 4 of these bullets were while he was already on the ground.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Backstory. I'm Dana Lewis. I want to talk to you about the Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands. And it begins with this. 26-year-old Ahmad Erekat. He is a cousin of Palestinian diplomat and negotiator Saeb Erekat, who died last year of COVID-19. Ahmad was shot by border police seconds after his car hit an Israeli checkpoint between Jerusalem and Bethlehem on the 23rd of June 2020. Since then, an investigation by a London-based human rights organization has said Erekat was shot while posing no immediate threat. He was not given any first aid by Israeli authorities after the shooting, despite showing clear signs of life. He was treated in an inhumane, degrading manner, did not accelerate towards the police officers, but showed signs of braking before impact. And he did not approach the police officers as the military claims. This is just one case which could become part of the International Criminal Court's investigation of Israel's treatment of Palestinians, which Israel opposes and has vowed not to cooperate with. On this backstory, the case of Ahmad Erekat, whose body has been held in a freezer since June and is still not being returned to the family. All right, joining me now, first of all, I want to introduce you to Dana Erekat, who is in Amman, Jordan. Hi, Dana.
Hi, Dana. How are you?
Will you lead me very quickly, before we come to the other people who we're gonna talk with, about what happened to Ahmad in terms of what you believe happened to him? The Israelis say that his car hit the checkpoint and they fired in self-defense, and they just want to move on from that.
Sure. So in June of 23rd of last year, it was actually Ahmad's younger sister's wedding. Her name is Iman, and Ahmad had dropped off his sister and his mom at the salon and had spoken to his dad and had gone to Bethlehem to run some errands for the wedding. There were a couple of hours left till the wedding was starting. And Ahmad's family, my uncle's family, is located in Abu Dis, which is east of Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And he was on his way to Bethlehem. And between Abu Dis and Bethlehem, there is a checkpoint called the Container, which is an illegal checkpoint. It's within the Palestinian areas. And what we had seen from the video, I mean, we got the call that Ahmad was shot and killed. And what we saw from the video is that Ahmad's car swerved and hit the checkpoint. And immediately he was shot and killed. At the moment we got the news, I didn't know here exactly what had happened, but I spoke to the family, and my uncle, his father, had gotten a call and immediately driven to the checkpoint to see what happened. And he found Ahmad laying down bleeding. And they would not let anybody approach him. So Ahmad was set to be married within a couple of months. His wedding had been postponed due to COVID-19. Mm-hmm. And he was 26 years old. He owned a printing shop, a t-shirt printing shop, very active, lively person. And we were all shocked. It was his sister's wedding. We knew in our heart that this could not have been intentional.
So what do you think happened then? I mean, the Israelis say he rammed the checkpoint. And I guess the problem is in all of these cases is that there will never be any independent investigation at this stage. The Israelis are occupying the area, and soldiers will do as they do, and there is really no recourse for Palestinians.
We, at first we did not know what happened, and that's why we hired an attorney, an Adala, to carry the case forward. We've spoken with Al-Haq repeatedly, and we've prepared a UN report to sort of assess from the one video footage that Israel released, the Israeli occupation released, is one video from one angle taken by a phone of a monitor, although there's more than a dozen cameras on that checkpoint.
And they've never released those camera videos to you. But what do you believe happened? You feel that we believe
in our hearts that it was an accident. However, from the one video they released, we could not we could not really tell what had happened. And this is when forensic architecture came in.
All right,
but what we did know for sure, and I want to emphasize that, while we did not know at the time what had happened prior to his killing, what we did know that his killing and the prevention of medical care to him constitutes extrajudicial killing, and that the way he was shot and he was refused treatment, and the way that the way they used the body in degrading manners constituted extrajudicial killing and a number of crimes that we carried forward to the UN repertoire with Al-Haq.
All right, let's bring in forensic architecture, and we're talking to Shoadi. That's the name she uses because for her own protection, she cannot use her real name. Hi, Shoadi.
Hi, Dan.
And also, Shawan Jabareen is from Al-Haq, which is a well-known human rights organization in Ramallah. Hi, Shawan.
Hi.
Can both of you tell me what you think of this case? Shoadi?
Yeah. So we received a very grainy short video clip from the army and really wanted to start by establishing some of the basic facts of the case that hadn't been established. And so when we started this investigation, we really wanted to understand basic information like how many shots were fired, who did the shooting, what was Ahmad's body position when he was shot. And as we continue to dig in to the claims that the army was making and what the visual footage was showing us, we realized a number of inconsistencies and frankly factual errors from the army statements. In other words, Ahmad came out of the car moving backwards. He was not running to the army. He was unarmed, raising his arms. There was no evidence that he was provided serious medical attention. And also his car was not accelerating significantly into the checkpoint. On those three accounts, the army's claims were contradicted.
And Shawan, I mean, there are so many cases like this in the West Bank. I mean, I was based in Jerusalem for a long time, and it's all through the 90s. I mean, I covered these cases with Palestinians who were shot by Israeli soldiers, and some of them were quite contentious cases. I think that was probably a different time when the investigations were taken probably a little more seriously than they are today. Would you agree with that? And would you say in general that soldiers from the IDF in the West Bank and around Gaza, I mean, they're not inside Gaza anymore, generally act as they want to with little recourse for Palestinians if something like this happens?
Look, Ahmad's case is not an isolated case, and this is part of a trend of killing. And what we do for cases like this, we investigate, we document directly, and we send, our field workers to the field, to the scene also, to collect and to gather first-hand data as much as we can. And even for Ahmad's case, this is what we did. And for other cases also, this is what we did. I'm sure that now, if we want to use this method and this kind of work and investigations, we can pick up hundreds of cases of extrajudicial executions. It's not just one case. But I think Ahmad's case, two things in Ahmad's case. One, the Israeli, they released this video, and also the people on the in the spot at that time, some of them they use also to record by their phones what's happened. That's helped in this case. More than that, I think the forensic architecture and the family, because also they were active in this, and we came together, just to build the real story and real facts, what's happened in this case. That's what makes it, strong and clear. But I can confirm that it's not an isolated case.
Is this the kind of case that you think that the International Criminal Court should be taking up, as it now says it has jurisdiction to investigate crimes in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, crimes against Israel and also crimes by Israel?
It has to be part of the cases, has to be submitted to the court, but the court at the end, they decide about which case they want to pick up and to focus more. But this is one of the cases. Here we are speaking about the crime of extrajudicial execution. And for this as a crime, you want to show that it's not just an isolated incident and not an isolated case. It's not one case only. We provide them all the cases because the extrajudicial execution and the willful killings, this is one of the crimes before also the ICC these days.
Donna, if I can bring you back in here, I mean, the Israelis would say, look, this is a manned checkpoint. The checkpoints have been attacked in the past. And here you have a car that swerves into the checkpoint. I think an Israeli soldier was sent flying by the vehicle. That's according to them. And that they're acting in self-defense. What do you say to that?
I think one thing that we need to keep in mind is that the checkpoint itself is an illegal checkpoint. It's within 2 Palestinian areas. So we can't deny the fact that this is an illegal checkpoint. Now, let's say even if this was an accident in the US or in another area, or an Israeli by accident rammed into a police checkpoint within Israel, they would not move forward with immediate killing. They can disarm the person. They can arrest them on the spot. I think as forensic architecture has shown in their investigation, is that Ahmad was shot 6 times in 2 seconds, I believe, or 4 seconds. And 4 of these bullets were while he was already on the ground. So there are methods for disarming. I mean, we had seen that. We can here draw a direct comparison with Black Americans in the US and police brutality, and how many, Black Americans have been killed by the police for minor misdemeanors and minor acts. While we have seen the riots at the Capitol, where, the police were able to disarm the protesters because the majority of them were white. And so we cannot disregard the systematic racism of oppression that is very present in this case. And we don't believe Ahmad meant to ram his car. We knew in our hearts on that day, it was his sister's wedding, knowing Ahmad. And that's why the family didn't rest until, we went different routes and forensic architecture was able to establish some of these facts.
So
what actually took place.
And I'm sorry for your loss. And I know it must be very, emotional for the family talking about it. And he was about to be getting married in a couple of months. And you have to question, why on earth would anybody ram their car into a checkpoint, the point that you have already made, when he had so much to live for? And
accidents happen. I think this is the problem. This is one of the main issues, is that Palestinians are not allowed to make an accident. They're not allowed an error. They're not allowed, you could be on your phone in the car and swerve in the wrong direction, and immediately you're in threat. You have to be on constant alert when you're there as a Palestinian, because a human error is not extended to you.
Will forensic architecture, Shoadi, get involved in this case and others in terms of trying to bring evidence before the International Criminal Court? Because Israel has said that they will not cooperate with any of those investigations.
Yeah, so forensic architecture has conducted investigations in Palestine that were considered by the ICC when they were determining whether to open up an investigation into Israeli crimes against humanity. This includes our investigation into the extrajudicial killing of Razan al-Najjar, a paramedic nurse in Gaza. This includes our investigation into the human rights violations in the last major Gaza war in 2014, the massacres that happened in Rafah in August 2014. It includes our major study into the settlements and the regime of conquer and divide that exists in the West Bank. So these 3 submissions were already made to the ICC. They were considered. And we are more than happy to cooperate with the ICC in regards to this case, which points to extrajudicial killings as well.
Some of the cases in Gaza are pretty horrendous, right? Where you have vehicles that were targeted with children inside and disemboweled children and women and families that were cut down in 2014 in the Gaza war.
I mean, the list of violations in Gaza goes beyond the time I think we have for this podcast. But at the very least, I mean, the Rafah project that we did examined a series of massacres that were happening in Gaza. And I don't use this word lightly, in the sense that you had a 1-ton bomb being dropped in a more densely populated part of Rafah. So there's no principle of distinction, there's no principle of proportionality. And what you see is an exaggerated level of violence in Gaza. But in other parts of Palestine, you have this consistent daily violence that Palestinians are faced with. And Ahmad is one of those many cases of people who are killed through lethal force, who are denied medical attention, whose bodies are humiliated and degraded, that we're starting to increasingly document.
Shawan, would you say that the International Criminal Court has a chance here of delivering some kind of justice? Does Al-Haq have confidence in that process? Or, the Israelis say it's very political, and that they're just trying, it's even anti-Semitic and against Israel, and that it's not a neutral body, and that they're going to do everything they can to discredit it.
You have to be aware that maybe later on they will describe you or they identify you as anti-Semitic person because you address these facts happened also on the ground. This is what the Israeli doing these days. They are exaggerating. Anyone, criticize or bring up and speak out about what's going on in Palestine, he or she become anti-Semitic, and they give him or her this label. I think this is the label that the Israelis, give to anyone who criticize or he speak the truth.
Well, the Israeli government may do that, but I know that there are lots of Israelis who are...
No. I'm speaking about the Israeli government.
Rights, and there are Israeli human rights organizations like B'Tselem and others who speak out against this kind of violence, right?
Before I joined you, I was in also an event with the EU parliamentarians. It was also a public one. I can give you and send you also the link. Yeah. Things like that also, it was discussed. Me and Hagai from B'Tselem, we were together, jointly in that one. This is, the case. I'm not saying that all the Israelis. I'm speaking about the officials these days. I'm speaking about the rightist wings, groups, how they exaggerating using these things. This is not a matter of discussion, but another thing is, if we have no confidence and hope that we will not cooperate with the ICC.
But you will
have a full confidence that the ICC will go after the Israeli criminals because the crimes happened and going on also at the same time. And Israeli, they try to attack and to paralyze this justice institution. I don't think that the state parties will let Israel to success in that, because if they success, will be catastrophic for the justice system over the world. It has not to concern Palestinians only. It has to concern everybody everywhere over the world. That's by power, by smearing against X and Y, you can do anything you want. And you can go in, which called, the impunity all the time. And if there is impunity continue, the crimes will continue. That's the case. I have a full confidence with the ICC.
One of the problems of our time are regimes who wish to label all of mainstream media fake news because they can try to discredit them and try to shield us from the truth. But Dana Erekat, the last word to you.
Currently, almost 9 months later, Ahmad's body is still being withheld by the Israelis. I think that is an important point that we need to touch upon and also have Al-Haq talk about. Ahmad is one of 73 bodies, Palestinian bodies, a number of them whom are children, who are being withheld without burial, without returning them to the family, to garner peace. And to
8 of them children.
8 of them are children, correct. And this is collective punishment. This is carrying the pain beyond just the killing of a child or of a son or of a daughter. And this in itself, and I'll actually leave it to Shahwan to talk a little bit, because I think this is something very important to put into the spotlight, is that the withholding of these bodies, and there are also around over 300 bodies in numbered cemeteries, I believe, that have also not been returned to their families. And this sort of collective punishment goes against international human rights.
Punishment for what? In Ahmad's case, probably.
For the families.
The families. It's collective punishment.
No, in some of these cases, even if the individual was guilty of something, the families are certainly not. They have the right to, I think, by any international legal standard, Shahwan, bury their dead and take their loved ones back and mourn their loved ones. Why on earth does Israel do that?
I think they want to punish and they want to broken down the effort of the families. That's the case. They use it for political reasons, for no other reasons. That's the case. And even the convention, the Committee of the Convention Against Torture at the UN in 2016, they recognized this as a way of torture of the families and ill treatment of the families. They mentioned specifically, the bodies of the murderers in the hands of the Israelis. More than that, what the Israeli can lose, for instance, if they give back the bodies and respect the family's rights, to give the bodies. Ahmad's family, the first contact with us, what they ask for? They ask for one thing only. Could you please help us to get back Ahmad's body, to bury him according to our customs, and just to pray on him? That's the main thing. And this is an emotional thing, because we deal with the families on a daily basis. Just you can imagine a mom said to me, in one case when I met with them, said, when I go to the kitchen, I go every day, maybe hundreds of times. When I go to the kitchen and look at the fridge, directly I remember my beloved, son. Why? Because I know that they put them, they frozen their bodies. And this is yet the case. The Israelis, they used to frozen their bodies. And when they send back, when they give the families back the bodies, we couldn't make an autopsy for the bodies, because it's like metal, like this. It needs 96 hours to be flexible.
I'm
they
shocked.
Start cut. This is the case.
I'm shocked that occurs, because I know the Israelis never used to do that. But anyway, Shahwan Jabarin, good luck on your efforts at Al-Haq Human Rights Organization. And Dana, I'm sorry?
Shadi, I think.
Shadi, may I just add here that the practice of withholding bodies as a tool of collective punishment and as a bargaining chip in future negotiations is something that has been sanctioned by the Israeli High Court. So the entire Israeli political and legal establishment is entirely complicit in this practice. And I think that also deserves to be called out and condemned, which is why the ICC investigation is so important, because it can hold that practice that is sanctioned by the Israeli establishment into account.
Dana Erekat, thank you so much. Shawadi from the Forensic Architecture, and Shahwan Jabarin from Al-Haq. Great to talk to all of you, and I think we'll talk in the future as this investigation from the ICC then begins.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The announcement of the International Criminal Court to investigate alleged war crimes against Israel by Palestinian groups like Hamas and alleged war crimes by Israel in Gaza and the West Bank is being met with stiff resistance by Israel. In part 2 of our backstory on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, we feature an interview from Israel on why the Israeli government refuses to cooperate. I'm Dana Lewis. Thanks for listening to Backstory. Share our podcast link, and you can follow my newsletter on danalewis.substack.com. danalewis.substack.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon.